What if the reason you keep getting injured has nothing to do with your training program and everything to do with your mindset? This video today is going to be a little bit more down the personal path rather than the clinical path that I've taken some previous videos on, but it's also going to give you some assistance from a clinical side of things on how to make decisions and improve both your mindset and training programs. I spent years training, making very little to no progress, whilst getting a lot of recurring issues that turned into chronic injuries along the way. And whilst yes, this did come from poor programming, at a foundational level, it was more my mindset that was holding me back from progressing and not getting injured rather than the actual training program itself. When I was a youngster, I grew up playing cricket, and cricket was literally everything to me, and I wanted to be the best at it. However, my thought process was the harder I worked, the better I would get at this sport. And I fell into this positive feedback loop where I literally just worked harder than everybody else. And I seemed to make good progress year on year in terms of improving at the sport. So I tended to build this relationship with hard work, that if I worked harder, I would get better and I would improve to the point that nobody else could catch me. And this more is better mindset eventually led down the path of me always feeling tired and fatigued and run down. However, as part of this positive feedback loop that I'd developed over time from thinking this way, it had become more of a way of identity, and I had to feel this way to feel like I was actually getting anything out of training, because that positive feedback loop had led me to constantly just wanting to get the feeling of fatigue and feeling like I'd worked hard. And if I didn't have that, then I hadn't worked hard enough. And as this progressed even more and more and more and became more of an identity for me, if I didn't feel like I had this level of fatigue, like I was always carrying some form of fatigue and I was tired, then eventually I identified with this level of just hard work. And if I wasn't working hard, I wasn't me, and I wasn't able to separate myself from the training and who I was. And the big problem with all of this is that I carried it beyond my cricket playing days. So once that was over and I realized that, hey, perhaps I wasn't as good as I would have liked to have been at this sport, and I finished up and then moved into just training because I enjoyed that for a while before just pursuing a little bit of extra sport here and there. But mostly it was just like I wanted to train hard and just be generally fit, GPP type of goals. I didn't have any real specifics that I wanted to chase hard, but I carried this hard work mindset of needing to be working the hardest, always feeling the most fatigued, and trying to outwork the opposition, so to speak, even though there were none. And over time, as this fatigue grew and grew and grew over a period of months and even years, I kept coming down with these like chronic overuse type issues. Like I had patella tendinopathy whilst I was still playing cricket, and after cricket I developed like an Achilles tendinopathy, and I had like a tendon issue through my groin or adductor area, and then I had issues with golfer's elbow and issues with tennis elbow. I'd have shoulders that would ache quite a lot. So all of these things became recurring issues for me, and like I'd get on top of one and then another one would flare up, and it just became this recurring cycle over and over again. And the worst part about all of this was not even the pain of these things, it was more the disappointment of actually not making any progress with training, whether it be in the strength side of things, speed and power, or even endurance. I would have minimal performance gains here and there, but they were few and far between. And overall, if you looked at the results on paper, it was quite lackluster. And the biggest thing out of this whole story so far was the identity piece. So I, like I said, was tied to who I was and what I was doing, and those two things were not separate. So athlete me and person me were the same person. And I identified as having to work really hard, be fatigued, and if I wasn't that, then I wasn't working hard enough and I felt invalidated. And the other problem I had here was my level of competitiveness. I was always very competitive on the cricket field, and I wanted to win, and not just win, I wanted to destroy the opposition. However, again, I took this with me after playing cricket, and every time I would either go to a commercial gym, or if I was out running and I saw someone who was ahead of me, I would then want to move past them and beat them, and not necessarily make them feel worse about themselves. It was more of a me issue. And if I was unable to achieve these like little weird identification pieces, then again, I would feel invalidated by that. And because I was unable to control this level of competitiveness in me, along with needing to feel like I was the hardest worker and that fatigue that came along with it, this is how these niggles and eventual overuse injuries came about on the regular, because I wasn't controlling, hey, maybe now's not the time to be competitive and I just need to tick some boxes, but I just couldn't get on top of that. And my identity, again, telling me that I had to do this thing to be valid, was what was keeping me in that rut of underperformance and injury. And if this video resonates with you so far, please understand that these things are not necessarily a weakness issue. If you're someone who cares deeply about what you do from a sporting performance context, you are going to be competitive, you are going to want to be a hard worker, and they are great traits to have. You just need to make sure that you can separate athlete you and person you, and not go down that path of, if I'm not working hard, or if I'm not getting the results, or if I'm not better than anyone else, then I'm invalidated, because that's not accurate. You need to be able to separate those things. Caring about what you do is a great thing, and you should care about what you do, but you also need to make sure that there's a time and a place to switch on and then switch off again. So this cycle went on for a really long time for me. I'd say it was even up until probably somewhere in my late 20s, and it probably started like back when I was in my early teens, because I had this competitive drive when I was a really young kid. But up until that late 20s period is when I probably really started to think about things a little bit more and realize that, hey, maybe something I'm doing is not quite right. And the real breaking point came when I had decided that, hey, I'm feeling pretty strong in the gym at the moment. Like my deadlift was going up towards 250, 260 kilograms, and I wanted to try and push hard towards getting a 272.5 kilo deadlift, which is a 600 pound deadlift in the imperial format. So I was going to chase this 600 pound deadlift, but at the same time, I'd also decided that I wanted to go back and play like some Masters Australian rules football with the local competition here. And the problem here wasn't so much the identity piece at this time, because I'd slightly worked through that, even though it was still sort of there under the surface. I had decided that I was going to chase these two things at the same time. And when I looked at playing this Masters Australian rules football, to me, it didn't seem like it was that intense. It was pretty easy. Training was pretty straightforward. There was nothing hard about it. But the stress, I didn't account for the stress. And again, I still did want to be someone who was working really hard. And so I put 100% effort into both chasing a 600 pound deadlift, but also chasing like being the best at this AFL competition. And because that identity piece lived with me, it eventually rears its head back again, and you become this person who is this athlete who works hard. They want to be better than everyone else and or the best at what they're doing. And they just have this identifier that if we're not doing that, we are not valid. So as the AFL season moved along, I probably had gotten into around mid-July, and the season would start for us. It was starting at the start of May. So we'd gotten into mid-July, and I started to develop this like nagging lower back pain. And that lower back pain, I thought to myself, this is probably just like tightness through my QL area. And the reason I thought that is because when I was younger playing cricket, I had the same kind of pain being a medium fast bowler in that lower back area quite a bit, where it would feel like I'm just tight through that QL. And so as I was going on through the season and playing footy, I was like, it's just a little bit of QL tightness, because you'd start off a little bit tight, you'd warm up, it'd settle down, and then after the game the next day, you'd pull up a bit sore, and then as the week gradually moved on, it'd feel a bit better. So what I didn't account for though, is when I started moving into like squatting and deadlift training sessions, that pain would actually get really, really sharp through that left-hand side of my mid to lower back area. And I was like, this really, really sucks. And it's kind of just getting worse. And as time moved on, I got towards the end of the season, finished it up, and I was pretty sore. And like, it got to the point where just having to run was painful, and getting up out of bed in the morning, I was always really stiff and it was uncomfortable, and I couldn't walk the dog for half an hour without it getting really, really uncomfortable and sore. And I went and discussed this in conjunction with one of our other physios in the clinic, and he sort of mentioned that, maybe it's a little bit of a stress injury going on here. And I was like, I don't know if it is that. But over time, as I had realized and thought back, this pain has been there for quite a while. And even looking before that football season had started, I'd felt pain like that before for the last sort of 2 to 3 years on and off. But I think footy is sort of the thing that really brought it on and made it feel a lot worse. But again, it had been there for a good 2 to 3 years before it really, really reared its head and made training almost impossible because of the levels of pain that were there. And you can see at this point that overload of trying to chase both a competitive football season and like really heavy lifting, those things are just way too much load. You cannot put 100% into both baskets. And if you're someone who is doing this, maybe it's time to sit back and start to think, hey, what am I actually achieving here? And is what I'm doing pushing me towards my current goals? Or is there just a lot of noise going on here and I need to just start redirecting my focus a little bit more? Because the biggest thing I had is when this pain got so bad and I couldn't actually train, I had to stop and literally have a lot more rest days than I would. I had to modify training like incredibly compared to what I ever would in the past, just so I could do something without any kind of pain or even like a little bit of tolerable pain. And I had to sit there and just think, what have I actually achieved in the last 3 to 4 years? Has it been notable? Or have I kind of just been spinning my wheels? And when I really looked back over what I was doing, my training volumes were really, really high. I wasn't recovering from it. I was always sore, and now I had this really, really big stress injury that was going to put me out for, at the time, what I'd hoped only maybe a few weeks to a couple of months, but it ended up being more like 8 to 9 months before I was actually able to do anything what I would have considered meaningful again. So now the shift. What have I done that is taking me away from that identity and mindset of always needing to do more, always needing to be better than everyone else, and always needing to feel like I'd been fatigued and worked really hard? How are we shifting out of that? And this is something you can use if you're having trouble with this as well. And number one is that the shift is not a quick light bulb moment. You are not going to have this moment of, oh man, I need to just really snap out of this. It's something that is a gradual process. You need to try and just make small changes along the way, because making big, overarching, drastic changes, while they may seem novel and exciting at the time, they rarely work out. You need to take small steps, gradual shifts along the way that are going to get you to where you need to go. To your subconscious, you're fighting against your identity here. If your identity is, I am this athlete and I work hard and I'm very competitive, trying to change that identity is not easy, and it's always going to be just sort of tapping away at you when you feel like you're trying to push against it. So you need to make gradual shifts and slowly adjust that over time. The next thing that I did, and what you would need to do as well, is really sit down and write about what you want to achieve. So what are your goals? So for me, I just love general physical preparedness training. I like doing the strength stuff. I like training for speed and power. I like doing endurance. I just want to tick all the boxes. And when you do want to do that, you need to realize that you are not going to excel in any one domain. You're not going to be the strongest powerlifter in the world. You're not going to be the best endurance athlete in the world. And you're probably not going to be the fastest sprinter in the world. But you can have like a little bit of everything and be okay with that. Now, after I'd sat down and really focused on what it was that I wanted to achieve, I realized that my goals weren't wildly different from what they were before. It's just that I was able to sit down and say, hey, instead of putting 100% into every single basket, I need to adjust how much percentage I'm dedicating to each thing, because you can't put 100% into everything when you've only got 100%. It's going to need to look like maybe I do 50% of this and 30% of that and then 20% of that. Because what I was doing is when I was putting 100% into everything, that's why I was getting injured and why I was feeling tired and fatigued all the time and not getting any results. And the other thing I did is I stopped trying to program for myself, because a lot of the time I would have a handle on it and then I'd get emotional and want to start chasing this thing, and you'd make these drastic changes and almost start program hopping a little bit, but putting way too many eggs into each basket. Again, you'd put 100% into strength and 100% into endurance and 100% into speed and power, and it would become this big ugly mash of work and you'd feel terrible all the time. So I stopped programming for myself, and I outsourced that just to take away the stress of having to do it. Because on the surface, whilst I did like the tinkering with the programming and experimenting with stuff, I'd also have this issue with when I did get competitive and that identity piece would kick in, I would sort of lose the plot a little bit and just want to do way too much work. And it was a case of, well, I feel good, I think I can do this, and so I would just do it anyway without really thinking hard about, is this the right thing that I should be doing? So don't be afraid to ask for help, and trust in the process and the person or the coaching program that you are following to get the job done for you. So what can this look like in other athletes? If you're someone who is either resonating with this video yourself, or you're someone who thinks that one of your other mates or fellow athletes are having trouble with, what can this look like and how can you help them identify that potentially this is a problem? Number one is people who don't take rest days because they feel like it's laziness. Having rest days is not lazy. It is simply a necessary means if you're someone who trains hard and you need your body to recover so you can continue training hard consistently, but also keeping the work sustainable in the long run. Number two is returning to training way too early post-injury because sitting out is just too unbearable for you. You need to respect the process that your body goes through in healing, and maybe your chronic over-volumization in training is going to require a period for your body to calm back down from. Number three is constantly comparing how much training you're doing compared to your peers, whether it be in person, through your footy team or your training group, or those on social media. You are not them, so don't try and just emulate what everyone else is doing. You need to do what you need to do to get the job done and get the result. The next thing is ignoring pain because stopping feels like a failure. Yes, a little bit of pain is part of the process of training and working hard and wanting to get better at a pursuit. You're probably never going to go through a career without some kind of pain, but if you just force your way through it, when deep down you know you should probably not be doing that, then you have a problem and need to address it. And the common thread with all of these things is that emotions are driving your decisions and not your actual physical and mental readiness to participate. So what I want you to do is sit down and ask yourself, is what I'm doing right now pushing me closer to my goals, or is it taking me further away? And am I likely to get injured if I keep going down this path, or am I likely to, even worse, burn out and not want to do this anymore? Am I feeding my performance goals, or am I just feeding some other emotional validator? And you need to start recognizing that it's not about training less, it's about training with intention and not anxiety. Remember, having high levels of motivation and competitiveness are assets if you can drive them in the right direction. The athletes who stay healthy long-term and stay competitive are not the ones who care less. They're the ones who have learned to direct their drive a lot more intelligently. If you're someone who this video did resonate with, I have got an email course in the description down below on recurring injuries, why they happen, what to do about it, and how to ultimately overcome them so they don't keep happening to you. If you're interested in that, please just drop your email in the link and I'll send that to you over a course of 7 days. And if you do have any other questions, please post them in the comments below.